Great game for the Dogs against the Dragons. Fantastic.
That was lovely.
The Morris
Dragons.
The Morris brothers in the centres for the Dragons, just amazing.
Yeah, killed it.
Your nephews were going to kill me on Saturday because every time I saw him, I'm like, "You go for Manly?" And he's like, lifts up his jumper to show me his shirt. He's like, "Wait, didn't you see the hat?" I was like, "Oh no, that's a Bulldogs hat."
My nephews were
They're the
into
cutest.
it.
Yeah.
They were so nervous before the game started. They saw Viliami kick out with his hair, and it was all like peroxide. It wasn't the black and the blonde. It was all like bleach. And they noticed the difference and like, he's in the zone. He's ready to go. So anyway, another week, another episode. Francis Tamer joins us today of the Francis Tamer Show, and we're going to get into that very shortly. But before there was the Francis Tamer Show, we go way back. We're mates of a long time, so you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Abuna.
Thank you for being here. Spiritual Sons with us.
Always.
And we've got a show sponsor, MJ Podiatry.
We do. And we want to thank MJ Podiatry. And just to remind everyone at home, MJ Podiatry is a mobile home visit network servicing all throughout Sydney. They're an all-round podiatry service, giving out general treatments, anything for sport as well, and NDIS and home care packaging are available as always. For any pains, injuries, custom-made orthotics, advice on footwear, anything you need, as we always say, MJ Podiatry has your back, but they've also got your feet. So, so visit their website at www.mjpodiatry.com.au or contact the team at 0412 389 278 or email them at info@mjpodiatry.com.au, and don't forget the ATG10 promo code for 10% off.
MJ Podiatry, great sponsors of the show. Event announcements: Dad's Rock Conference on the 19th of August, 6:45 to 8:30 p.m. at Club Marconi. A few gun speakers there: Charbel Reish from Perusia Media, Tomislav Uskok from MacArthur FC, who's both of those guys have been on our show, and the parish priest at St. Anthony of Padua, Austral, Father Ronnie Marie. They're all going to be there talking and giving witness. So we want everyone to get out to that and lend your support. The next event, run by the men's ministry of the Sydney Archdiocese, the Be Not Afraid Conference. So 21st of September, an all-day men's conference at St. Mary's Cathedral. We have a lot to talk about today. I've been on the Francis Tamer Show, but before we get into all of that, we're going to get to know Francis a little bit. But by way of probably those university years whereby we met each other, because you're a bit of a figure in conservative circles.
Back in the day, maybe.
Back in the
it's
day.
quieted down since.
It was did we establish 2018 or 19 that we met?
I think it was
Fourth year seminary. Yeah, 18 it may have been.
It would have been 18. I dropped out in 19. So,
okay. So it would have been around there.
That's a good, it's an important milestone.
Good checkpoint.
So we met there, university campus, University of Sydney. And as we all know, universities aren't the most flattering of environments these days.
Yeah.
And you're in the thick of it. So do you want to share with us some of that and maybe what was going on at the time for you to be in the thick of it?
Yeah, so I guess it sort of started when I joined the Catholic Society. It was so I started uni 2014. It was towards the end of 2014 that I found the Catholic Society, just by chance. And it was quite interesting. I found the Catholic Society because I was looking for a mass to go to, because I hated university and my life so much. Like, it was that bad. I stopped going to class. I was telling you guys before the show, I don't really follow rugby league as much anymore. In those days, every day, I'd go up to the library and I'd watch 80s and 90s and early 2000s rugby league matches on some Fox subscription that I took off someone. So that's all I did. So I hated uni, didn't see the purpose. That's when I sort of became a bit of a foil hat guy, like, uni's a scam, we're being scammed, everything's a scam. It was that phase of my life, which still continues, of course. It's gotten worse. Now it's like pajamas, everything. Anyway, so I'm looking for a mass to go to, and I just jump online. I find a Facebook post, mass at the Legion of Mary. I was like, what's this Legion of Mary? It sounds like almost a cult, to be honest. It was a foreign concept for me. Like, I always grew up in a Catholic family. Mass every Sunday, but I'd never really sort of gotten involved. So I went to this Legion of Mary on Broadway. Mass had finished by that time, and I saw the set of stairs. Did you ever go to the old JP2 Centre on Broadway?
Not the old one, but I know the building.
The building.
Because that's where they still have the Legion of Mary meetings.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. So it's this standout yellow building on Broadway.
Okay.
And you go up these steps and there's like fruit flies everywhere. No one goes there like, accidentally. Like we had to go on campus, convince people, like come to the centre, it's actually a great place, which it was, but it wasn't always inviting from the outside. So I went up and I just saw everyone sort of scrambling, people wearing suits, really well dressed. But what's going on here? Ran into a few people who introduced themselves, and it was the day that Cardinal Burke was in Sydney. So on that day, Cardinal Burke was in Sydney and he was doing an event for UCD Catholic Society. In fact, I think it was the anniversary of that is this month sometime. I think they're back into this month. So I went to this Cardinal Burke talk and people are like, it's Cardinal Burke. I've never heard of the bloke.
Who is Cardinal Burke?
He's a very well-known Orthodox cardinal in Catholic, Orthodox as in...
Style.
Yes,
Yeah.
A Catholic Orthodox cardinal in the United States.
Oh, okay.
Really staunch, yeah. Great cardinal, which I discovered after the fact. So everyone's talking about this Cardinal Burke, and that's when I sort of met everyone. And from that point, I was sort of a regular at the Catholic Society. They were praying the Rosary every day, and it was the first time sort of at uni I felt like I sort of belonged somewhere. Because it was hard going to uni at first. No one from my high school went, pretty much. I think one other person. Didn't really know anyone. It was very foreign. I got involved with the Catholic Society and the work that they do. Every year they do Christ Week, which is a 1-week mission on campus. The other semester they do Life Week, which is another 1-week mission. That's a little bit more controversial because it's about life issues and stuff like that. And that's sort of where it all started.
So it all started there. And you talk about feeling a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Would you say that was the first time in your life you felt a real kind of Catholic identity?
I would say so, yeah. Like before that point, again, I was practicing, so it wasn't like I was out of the faith, but I'd never really pursued further. Like I remember going down, Eastern Avenue, which is the main strip at UCD, and on one side you have the Catholic Society that's preaching the name of Jesus, and on the other side you've got people like sign a petition to legalize abortion, and to the point they're chanting things like abortion is good, and neither side really allows you to stay in the middle. When it sort of rings true, the whole thing about being lukewarm, like you can't, because the side that is screaming abortion is good and sign a petition for every problem in the world, they don't accept you being, like you saying, nah, look, I don't want to sign. It's like, oh, so you're against us? And it's like, well, yeah, I'm either with you or against you. And the church is the same way. I mean, Christ speaks that same way. Yeah. So I sort of felt like I had to go one way. And it was a clear choice for me, but it wasn't until I went that way that I sort of really found that identity. Yeah. And look, maybe there was a part of it that was a bit of escapism from uni. Like I just didn't enjoy what I was doing. And I finally found a sense of purpose and maybe a distraction. So there is that element, which we always need to be careful of. Like you can be distracted with things that appear on the surface to be of God. Yeah. Like, oh, I love going to church. It's like, yeah, but, you might have a wife, you might have kids, you might have a husband, you have a job. You can't go to church and make, help with the youth barbecue every single day when you've got a state of life to adhere to. And that was my challenge. I was so committed to the Catholic Society. I had no issue going out and getting things thrown at me, but try and get me to a class. And I was like, nah, I've been divinely called to... So, there was definitely that sense of identity for sure.
It's interesting. There's a common thread and theme in the people that we interview, even as recently as Paul Hanrahan last week, who admitted that growing up, his Catholic faith he didn't know much about. And then when it came to that, I suppose, that moment of, I've got to choose either for or against now. There's no middle ground here. I can't just pick and choose what I want to believe. Yeah. It kind of grips you, it takes you, and then once our Lord has you, you can't turn back. Yeah. But with that obviously comes controversy. Yeah. Because the world is going in such a way that we're being more removed from reality. There are all sorts of ideologies out there.
Yeah.
And people are under this this false almost... they adopt this false reasoning that Catholicism and the following the way of Jesus is just one amongst many options that you can take in life.
Yeah.
And so you would soon and quickly realise that that's not the case.
Yeah, it was like, we always had to deal with... You can sort of categorise the people at uni in a few different ways. You've got sort of your far, legalise abortion, legalise euthanasia, we are the Communist Party of Australia type people. And they were just they're the violent type. They'll shout you down. They'll abuse you with no regard. They don't care, which we'll see. We've got a video we can even, have a look at. Then you've got people who don't believe, and they might think what we believe is a bit stupid, but they just sort of leave you alone. It's like, whatever, you believe what you believe, just leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. And you can't sort of pull everyone together because everyone's got a different disposition, everyone's got different life experience. And that was the biggest thing I learned at uni. When you speak to someone, there's a whole life of experience behind them that's led them sort of to that point. And you can't convert someone in a minute. And the goal almost, it might sound weird, the goal isn't to convert as in, like it's a KPI,
Yeah.
It's like a KPI, how many conversions, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, can we authentically give someone an accurate representation of what Christ is for the first time potentially ever in their life? And let Christ do the rest, don't think so highly of yourself that you are going to be the one to get the job done. Yeah. You know what I mean? So there was always this whole, that's your truth, this is my truth. And when you grow up a certain way and you haven't dealt with conflict, your first inclination is like, yeah, that's fair enough. But it's like, no, hold on. It's not just my truth. This is the society I live in. This is the country I live in. This is my community. I care about people in my community. And so then I have to care for their spiritual well-being. I have to care about unborn babies being murdered. You have to care about that. It's not about, you do what you want and I do what I want. Just as if I had a slave in my house, I'm sure many people would have an issue with that. And so changing that mindset as, hey, right, it's not just about your truth and my truth, it's about the truth. And you're definitely met with a lot of resistance. And it probably started in around 2016 when the Catholic Society is an official club on campus and we have a constitution, and just as all clubs do. And the student union is responsible for governing all the clubs. And they did a review of our constitution and of the Evangelical Union, which is the Protestant club. And we had a condition that said any executive member has to be a practicing Catholic. And they had a condition, the Protestant club, that any executive member, or any member for that matter, has to profess Lord Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour. And they said, no, you can't do that. We're the Catholic Society. Anyway, we went back and forth. It ended up sort of on the news, in the newspaper, this big sort of battle. Then they sought legal advice, and then they came to us and said, actually, it should be okay.
Yeah.
And we actually strengthened, we made it more watertight. Not only do you have to be a practicing Catholic, you have to publicly agree to all the teachings of the magisterium of the Catholic Church and be subject to questioning during an election about what you believe. But that's necessary. We are the Catholic Society. Yeah, we can't be run by anyone but a Catholic.
I would love that to be on every contract a teacher signs in Sydney Catholic schools.
Yeah.
Now, no, I don't make too light a joke of that, but with this new equality bill coming out, it may seem as though no one is safe now.
Yeah.
Is that discrimination is not permissible in this instance, whereby you could have someone with varying and alternate beliefs. If you don't employ them, they could sue you for discrimination. Or if you don't let a member come into the Catholic Society based on their own beliefs, then that might be an issue moving forward if all of this stuff passes.
Well, what do you think the church should do if something like this gets through?
It's a good question.
Because I'm outside the church hierarchy in the sense you're involved at the cathedral, you're one of the clergy. It's very easy for us on the outside to be like, if they don't do it, the church should just shut down every school and say we're not budging until you reverse. But practically, is that something that's sort of on the table?
The Archbishop made a very bold statement about a month or two ago, I think it was, saying that if we have to, then Catholic schools don't exist anymore. We take Catholic out of Catholic schools and we just leave you all to your own devices and we do our own independent thing. So that might be one thing. That was a very strong statement.
That's a very strong statement, yeah.
And we might,
because any threat made has to be followed through.
We might follow that up with the article that was in. I think it was a Catholic Weekly article. Or it could have been on the Facebook page, one of his posts, but we'll double check that. But I mean, that's the type of thing where it's like, okay, this is what we have to do. I mean, we need to keep it all authentically Catholic. And we've on this show many times, we've seen instances of people being annoyed with the whole Jason Evett thing coming out, you know, teaching authentically Catholic teaching on sexuality and relationships, and Catholic schools in different dioceses just buckling and cancelling him and all that kind of stuff. So it's all garbage. But I mean,
God forbid our kids have dignity. Yeah,
I know. And that's the thing. It's like we as adults need to continue to pave the way for the up and coming generations. We need to be people that set an example. And the example we set is Christ. It's not ourselves. I was thinking about it the other day. We have for so long now wanted to fashion generations of people in our image and likeness.
Yeah.
And
look where it's gotten us.
And what I mean by that is the cultural, the ideological, that kind of thing, where people just need to be reminded they're made in the image and likeness of God, and that's the direction we need to be pointing in. So yeah, that's a very different tone to what you guys had as a small victory back then.
Well, yeah, at the time we rounded up all the religious societies, and it's like, look, we all got to work together here because this affects all of us. There were 2 Jewish societies. One was like sort of more orthodox, one more sort of liberal or progressive. The 2 Muslim societies, but the Sunni and the Shia societies, the Evangelical Union. We drafted like a joint statement. It was actually it's a cool thing to do. You know, it's still hung up, the signed joint statement in the Catholic Society, because we got it done and we actually tightened the Constitution so much. So hopefully it's something we don't have to deal with for a few years. But what's interesting and what I've always maintained to people is, if you want to know what society is going to look like in 5 years, just walk into a university, especially University of Sydney, because it's 5 years ahead, if not more. All the things we're seeing now, we were seeing it back in 2014, 2015, 2016. It was all there, you know, like the attack on the ability to mandate that your employee or someone involved in your organisation is Catholic or subscribes to the same beliefs of that organisation. Like that's now happening in law. It was happening 10 years ago at uni, you know. All the transgender stuff, that was a huge thing back when I was there. It wasn't yet as mainstream. You know, like we had run-ins with that stuff all the time before there was any mainstream sort of support with how to deal with it, you know.
Do you fear that a lot of our it's sad when it's happening on the high school level, but it's definitely prevalent on the university level of education, that it's more activism than it is a free exchange of ideas and conversation?
Yeah.
That's a dangerous society to live in.
Yeah.
And my fear is, I mean, that's what we sometimes, granted, I'll admit, we can get sucked into our own little echo chambers of what we watch, what we listen to. So whenever you think of a university campus, all you're thinking of is activism and the like. But are these are supposed to be the model places of education, of research, of exchange of ideas and conversation?
Yeah.
Where did it all go wrong?
Well, Abuna, you know where the university method came from, right? The Catholic Church. A lot of people don't know the Catholic Church essentially invented the university method. So it was ours first. You know, we should make that clear. And originally, I mean, the whole point of a university is they're researchers and they teach to fund their research. That's sort of the concept behind it. Almost all universities in the Western world now are completely stacked with this progressive, liberal. I don't like to use the word left all the time because we don't want to associate being of the faith with a particular political group. It's not wise to do so. But the reality is they are pretty far gone left in that way, and it's scary to speak freely on an idea that you have at university for most people. You know, like when we talk about that protest that happened during the same-sex marriage plebiscite, like we had some of our students literally in the corner in tears, terrified because people were screaming at them, throwing things at them. They'd never experienced it. You know, it's quite a shock to the system initially. So the problem becomes, because of how it is, less and less sort of strong, faithful people feel inclined to go to uni. You know, and so it just becomes like a spiral. Most of the teachers, lecturers, that's just how it is. That's why we've got a responsibility, and it's quite ironic because I dropped out of uni, but we should go into academia, you know, if it's our calling, and be involved, like do our part, because there are lots of people there that need to hear the voice of reason. Just as the other side might suggest they're the more reasonable ones, that's fine, you can suggest that, but we should have that freedom to explore that. Like as a student, you should be able to explore that. It's very hard to do so, you know.
I'm sure you can multiply the examples, but you did mention briefly then the tension at the university during the same-sex marriage plebiscite.
Yeah.
Now, for those listening at home, it's become it's common now, and around the world, it's common that we redefined what marriage is. Okay, now marriage is an institution given to us by God. It's been elevated for us as Christians to the level of sacrament by Jesus. The natural law suggests that marriage is between man and woman. You become one flesh, and it's the only way possible within a moral means to conceive a child. Now, that all got changed because of the popular vote.
Yeah.
And very much like in the spirit of most change through time, I don't believe it to be through a good thing. It was really just campaigning and activism and who had the loudest voice. And now they mastered in all things like be compassionate, be, love is love. And they went through all of these types of slogans, and they made anyone that wanted to preserve the institution of marriage as one man, one woman, exclusive partners for life. They made anyone that held to that definition feel as though they were bigoted, they were discriminatory, they were all sorts of hateful and terrible people. And now I fear that our younger children are just growing up thinking that it's just a different type of thing. It's marriage, but it's just different. You know, there are different forms of families, which we know not to be the case, although society tells us otherwise. Tell us what that was like as you were promoting at the time what we called the no vote.
Yeah.
And one of the slogans was, it's okay to vote no.
Yeah.
What type of tension do you experience on the university campus during that time? Because you made national news.
Yeah. Andrew Bolt.
Hey.
Yeah, Andrew Bolt.
Yeah, made it big time.
So,
big time.
But what I might just add to what you said, Abuna, they also did something else. They started campaigning before us. They started campaigning 40 years ago. And this all started with no-fault divorce. Before no-fault divorce, there were 3 reasons you could get a divorce, the 3 A's: abandonment, adultery, abuse. Now we have no-fault divorce. So if you say to anyone now, I think no-fault divorce was a bad idea, you'll be surprised with the hatred you are met with. It's like, hold on, I'm not saying a woman should be in an abusive relationship. Where there should be fault divorce in the eyes of the state, which in the eyes of the Catholic Church is separation, which is a whole different topic about divorce and annulments. But separation in and of itself is not intrinsically a sin in certain circumstances. No-fault divorce normalized the idea that as soon as you're not happy for any reason, and it can be very volatile how someone feels about their spouse. You'd know more than anyone, Abuna, through dealing with couples, that it's not always smooth sailing. That's just what I've heard on the street. I'm not married, so yeah. But that's where it started. Then they legalized same-sex couples adopting. That was allowed. So we say that marriage is exclusive between 2 people for life. They've been chipping at this tree for 40 years. And then right when they're about to do the final blow, we say, no, hold on, this tree is ever so dear to us. And they say, what are you talking about? It's hanging on by a thread.
Well, let me add to that. Not only no-fault divorce, but the contraception culture as well.
Contraception, yeah.
So when we talk about that unitive act, which Paul spoke about so beautifully the other week, and in previous episodes, we've had Simon Carrington and Jason Everett. When you take the unitive and the procreative and you separate those things and you say sex is just for pleasure and I can have sex with as many people as I want with no consequence, then any sexual act becomes, in the eyes of society, a good, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so the contraception culture changed things radically.
Radically, yeah. The sexual revolution changed things radically. I mean, have you heard of Alfred Kinsey?
Yes, I have.
Have you heard of Alfred Kinsey? He's known as the father of the sexual revolution. It was Alfred Kinsey's book that inspired Hugh Hefner, who is the Playboy dude, right? Alfred Kinsey wrote a book called Sexuality in the Human Male. That's where that famous statistic, 10% of the population is gay, because he did a study on 3,000 high-security inmates and found 10% of them had interacted sexually with another man.
Inmates.
Inmate.
Exclusively male environment.
Yeah. We're talking like murderers, rapists. These are the guys that he took his stats from. But Alfred Kinsey is known for the most morally depraved research, which no one talks about. And it might be hard for people to hear. So, again, just, viewer discretion advised. But it's like there's a famous table in it where he records the ages of children and whether they could experience certain sexual pleasures. He effectively was funded to molest and rape children.
Yes.
And he was in correspondence with a Nazi about his research. Like, this is the book that literally ignited the sexual revolution, right? Which contributes, again, to chopping down this tree. But to go back to your question, because context is always important. Like,
very important.
How did we get here in the first place? And that was the shock for me, because I haven't been alive, 40 years. So I don't know what was happening. And all of a sudden I'm fighting for something. And the other side says, what are you fighting for? Like, you guys already lost. Which is very hard to hear, of course. And I don't believe it wasn't worth fighting for, let me be clear. But it's just disheartening that we've become so reactionary.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, they're trying to change this and change that. It's like, well, what have we done to protect what is ever so valuable to us, So being on campus during that time, we were already sort of a bit hated because we'd run events before that had inflamed people, especially anti-abortion related stuff, anti-contraception related stuff, all of that. And we once famously held a talk called Man plus Woman equals Made for Each Other, ? That was the title of the talk. And there was literally a protest of 80 people chanting F the Catholic Church in unison. Like, it was like an organised... And that was the first time we'd been sort of protest that hard with people so passionately against what we were doing.
So pause there. Okay. You've got the title of this talk.
Yeah.
All right. For millennia, this has been the accepted, the common, the reason that we all exist today. Okay. Now, for these so-called academics and people who want to grow in additional study, tertiary studies, the best thing they could do rather than exchange ideas and talk to you guys was organize a mass mob to shout you down.
Yeah.
And this is what we're seeing. We see it today. We see it with the whole pro-Palestine stuff. We see it with so much today. It's just shouting down, no exchange of ideas, no civil discourse. It's important that people get this picture because not a lot of people get this picture. When people are making so much noise, it eliminates the ability to sit down and critically analyze and think about the ideas that should be expressed. So whenever you hear slogans, whenever you hear these one-liners and these 30-second clips that so many young people are into these days, they formulate opinions based on these things.
Yeah.
And there's no room for ideas. There's no room for thinking and analysing and being critical. And so this is one of your first experiences.
The first major one. So we'd had people shout us down before, but it was the first time. And I sort of have this rule, right? the prerequisite to disagree with an idea that I have is that you understood the idea in the first place. Just understand it, then we can disagree on it. But when you start screaming and shouting and there's no sort of inquiry into, hey, like, Anthony, when you say this, what do you actually mean? What do you actually mean? Really, really nail the idea. And then if you want to disagree, I'm sure you'll be a lot calmer about it, So we hold this event and we start the event, the speaker's going, and we just 80 people marching down Eastern Avenue with trumpets, megaphones, and they stop at the sort of marquee tent, because we'd set up on campus for mission weeks, just screaming all sorts of things, bigots, F off, F the Catholic Church, and they get pretty creative at times. And at one point, someone actually switched off the power to the marquee to try and stop the talk. And look, we finished the talk, and what I was standing outside with some of the other guys, so they didn't approach too close. And what was interesting is you really got to speak their language. So if you tell them to back off, they just move up more. But at one point I was sort of standing there and this guy got quite close, and I just said really politely, I said, "Excuse me, you're really in my personal space right now." He's, "Oh, I'm so sorry, man." And he jumped back 5 steps, like, "Oh wow, it's like there's a secret to this." Like, you got to talk about safe spaces, and people can they resonate with that. So, but what was interesting is, of those 80, I started engaging in conversation with a few of them, and it pretty much went down to about 3, and then 3 were engaging conversation. And it was quite weird because I'm talking with these 3 people, and there's 50 people surrounding us just watching this argument or discussion or whatever it is on campus. And I remember speaking with them, and someone comes next to me who's from the Catholic Society, and they had a piece of paper in their hand. And I sort of lifted up the paper to see what he had in his hand. And it was something about, statistics of people who transition and then commit suicide or something. And I was like, "What are you doing? This is not the time for that." Right now, the conversation we're having is, are we allowed to have a conversation? Yeah. That's where we were at in the stages, And the more we spoke, one of them, he actually sort of came around. He said, "Look, I apologize for the way we acted today." Because I said, look, you guys talk about intimidation and how hurt you guys are. We've got people crying. You're screaming F the Catholic Church at, first year students, boys and girls alike. How do you think they feel? And he apologized. And funnily enough, after that event, he messaged me and thanked me for the way I spoke to him. Because he's obviously come quite aggressive to this event. And he said, "Oh, it's the first time someone's responded to me, but not in an aggressive way." Now, obviously, what does he expect if that's how he approaches people? But at the same time, we can sort of start to change someone's heart a little bit just by how we act. But where it started to get really serious is there were these 2 girls with him, protesters as well, and she was yelling all these things about how we're responsible for, self-harm in the LGBT community. And so we're talking, and I mentioned, look, we're not strangers to persecution. A lot of us are from the Middle East. And at that time, that was when ISIS was sort of at its height of power. There were Christians being crucified. There were kids being crucified in front of their parents, because their parents refused to deny the faith. And she said something which till this day gives me chills. She says, "There, that's different, Francis. You guys choose to be Christian." I thought, wait, well, hold on, back up. Are you saying that because it's our choice, the consequence is our fault? And she just sort of shrugged well, you guys want to be Christians. It's almost like that's what you get for being a Christian. Yeah. And that was the first real, man, there are some people out there that really hate the church to the point where legitimate stories of persecution of children doesn't make them change at all. Yeah. Again, it's not a cause for us to fight against them. It's a cause for us to realize there are strong forces at play here. This isn't just people involved. There are spirits on either side. That's why we always talk about the spiritual war, because there are some deep-rooted issues that exist in our communities that sort of lead people there.
You touched on the change of heart in that guy that you spoke about.
Yeah.
And we've kind of spoken about it on the podcast before, but it's so important that we're not just, throwing these stats that you had on paper to these people and trying to change their minds, because without a change of heart, you could give them a perfect argument and they still, you know, they'll still stick to their side.
Yeah.
Just the way you responded is powerful. Like, I think we all, I mean, I know I can learn a lot from that, because you hear, like, even when you were talking, I was sort of like, you know, you mentioned what they say and I'll like sort of scoff or whatever, you know, because it's like, it's annoying to hear. But to respond with that love, as in, like Paul Hanrahan spoke about it last week, these people are hurt. Yeah. Like you mentioned, there's a deeper issue than just what's coming out of their mouth. So, this whole like demolish someone in an argument or whatever, this person destroyed this person.
Yeah, exactly.
They're always fun to watch. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, you get a kick out of it, but does it achieve what you want it to achieve?
Exactly, you know? Exactly. So the person, you know, I was watching a Lila Rose debate. Not that Lila Rose did anything wrong. Actually, the way she argues,
she's really good at that. Not being concerned with trying to destroy people, but actually trying to get to the heart of it. Yes,
exactly. And she was sort of discussing so it was pro-life versus pro-choice debate. The pro-choice girl was a self-professed Christian who's pro-choice. She has some page called God is Grey because nothing is black or white and all this. It was weird. Anyway, she wasn't very, strange. But to be honest...
Laughable.
Yeah, honestly. To be honest, and this isn't like, I'm not just bagging her out, but she's not one of the more intelligent people that Lila Rose has come up against, right? So she contradicted herself, I'm not joking, like 6 times in the first 20 to 30 minutes, right? And I was getting frustrated listening to it. But Lila Rose was there, just so calm, so patient, but so gentle and polite. So she was firm in everything she was saying, in the content in what she was saying, the content of you know, the debate. Yeah. She was firm, but in her approach to the girl, she was gentle.
Very
and
gentle.
Polite.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And you can watch that and go, this girl got smashed, whatever, Lila Rose destroyed her and whatever. Or you can look at it the way this guy responded to you, where this girl would have gone away and thought, okay, you know what? There was a lot of love with which, you know, Lila Rose spoke to me. That guy went, you know what, this guy spoke to me with charity. And so that then affects, like you said already, the change of heart. Or, I mean, who knows where this guy's at
again, like what we said earlier, it's not up to us to work out where he goes from there.
Yeah.
It's just in my small interaction with him, what's the best thing I can do to open that window a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, the way I responded, but in those moments, I get infuriated as well. You know, before the show, I was telling you I have severe road rage. Like us Middle Easterners, anger is innate, okay? So it's not like I don't get annoyed, I don't get angry, I don't struggle, but it's like in that moment you really think, am I going to act in the interest of my own pride or in the interest of their soul? And you might not always get it right, and I didn't always get it right, but over time you sort of realize, hey, am I just here to protect my pride so I can say I own that guy? We don't want to own them. Like, we want to get along with them. We want to show them that, hey, the path that we walk is one of peace, authentic joy, fraternity, things that every person desires, you know. But you're very much right. Like, I'm not a fan of that culture around destroying, as entertaining as it can be to watch. You know, it doesn't serve the purpose of actually trying to progress as a community. You know what I mean?
Can I ask, like, why? And this is probably a question that it's a question you probably got asked by a lot of the people on the other side. Why, if you're copping so much abuse and everything, what made you so certain that you had to defend, say, the real meaning of marriage, or in other cases, defend abortion? Like, what are the reasons that you copped all that abuse to stand for that?
Look, I think at the time it did come from a place of imperfect love, you know, and maybe you can speak to it a bit more, Abuna, but you've got the perfect love where you do what's right because you love God. And you've got imperfect love where you do what's right because you're afraid of what will happen if you do the wrong thing. Is that a good sort of
there's like
summary?
contrition and imperfect contrition.
Yeah.
When you go to confession, yeah.
And admittedly, that's sort of where I started. And at times, I still wrestle with that. Obviously, the goal is perfect love. But look, imperfect love it's not the worst thing you can be doing, you know? And so it was almost a logical sequence. Like, do I believe Christ is real? He died, was resurrected. Do I believe all of that? Do I believe in the scriptures, the gospels? Do I believe in the church he established? If I believe all of that, won't I one day be questioned about why I didn't act when I had the opportunity to? Like we've almost, even as pro-life Catholics, and the pro-life thing's important because Alice von Hildebrand, I don't know if you've heard of her, quite beautiful woman. Like when she passed away, I was sad I never got the chance to meet her, but she has this great quote, and she says, "Abortion is the greatest victory of the devil since original sin." And there's a strong argument for that. But even as pro-life Catholics, or anyone pro-life, we've almost become desensitized. Like, this still happens.
Yep.
Like, unborn children are still being killed. And, like, we're worried about making it home in time for the footy. As much as we love the footy, Anthony.
Yeah.
You can watch. You can watch the highlights after, you know, on those days. But it's like we prioritize all these little things in our life, and it's like, man, what have I done? You know, and that's the feeling I had again in 2019 when the abortion bill was being debated in New South Wales Parliament. I was on a plane coming back from Lebanon, and it already started. And I remember just sitting in that plane thinking, what have I done? Like, I'm literally watching this thing unfold, and I haven't acted yet. You know, and that's when I sort of got more involved once I touched back in Sydney. But a lot of it came from imperfect love. Like, there was that fear, and you sort of realize, look, every person has a part to play in the body of Christ, in your community, and no part is better than the other. You know, we just have to each do our part well.
Yeah.
Like, you'll be like, imagine the best athlete in the world and he loses his big toe. Like, that would be catastrophic to his Olympic, you know, sprinting chances. You know, but people would think, oh, it's just your toe. Every body part is important. And so I just thought to myself, what's my part here? And one of the things I learned how to do was have conversations. You know, we'll get to the podcast, but it's something I love doing. And having conversations with people was my way to give back to Christ, you know.
Paul the other week said that there are particular people that are called to particular ministries and ways of life. Now, when we come to these, what we call life issues, whether it be right to life, whether it be marriage and sexuality and family, these are topics that not a lot of people like to engage with, especially in the modern context, because they are so controversial.
Yeah.
You, on that plane, on your way back from Lebanon, are thinking to yourself, what am I doing? What have I done? What should I be doing?
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of the same-sex marriage plebiscite stuff, and God's training you. He's training you. He's building you up.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Very uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. It's like everyone else wants to put their head in the sand.
Yeah.
And unless we have good, courageous people who are not only going to talk the talk but walk the walk, stand up to speak for the truth and for the right thing, then the 5% of noisy people are always going to win.
Yeah.
They're always going to win.
And that's what frustrates me still till this day is a lot of people within our church are really good with a keyboard. They're really good with their Instagram comments, and they'll share some, oh, look at this boxer at the Olympics, what he's done, look at this. And they'll even message people who are putting themselves out there. Whether you guys probably get it all the time. You know, people message, you're doing awesome work, which is great. It's always nice to have someone affirm what you're doing. But it's like, you can also do something. You don't have to go out, you don't have to start a podcast. You don't have to go out and get condoms thrown at your head. You don't have to do that. But there's always something to do. You know, sometimes the volunteers that are going out and doing that, sometimes they just need someone to bring them some water because it's a hot day when they're campaigning. Like, you can do that, and you're just as important to the mission. But don't sit there from your phone and say, oh, look how horrible the world, and it's all gone to crap and all this, and do nothing. That's what was most frustrating for me, is when push came to shove, very few people were left at the end. And speaking about the same-sex marriage thing, I don't know if you've downloaded the video from the link that I sent you, but maybe we'll watch that before we talk about it.
Yeah.
And your first question will 100% be, Francis, how weren't you infuriated? And my answer is going to be, I was. Make no mistake about it. It was very uncomfortable.
Yeah. We're talking about affirming something that has never existed, but I suppose at the end of the day gives if you want to call it this, but I'm reluctant to call it this because I don't think it will ever be when it's not grounded in truth, but it gives them almost a peace of mind or a false equivalency on living a life similar to a man and woman and their family. Now, the problem with all of that is, and these questions still can't be answered to this day, is if you get a same-sex couple who want a child, that child will always be denied their mother or their father. That child will always grow up not knowing. That child never had a choice to know. Now, the counter-argument will always be, well, what about the father that left the marriage before the child was with it enough to know the father, or same thing with the mother? Or what about a child that just grows up in a one-parent family because there was a death? That's completely different. These are all of those outliers.
They're exceptions. Yeah. The law upholds the ideal.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's about the rule, not the exception.
Yeah. So and for too long, like we still, to this day, it's almost like we've conceded. The change has been made. It's commonplace now in society. Hurry up and just get with the times.
Yeah.
But I really fear for the way that the culture has almost degenerated in the acceptance of all of this, in the normality of all of this.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get a little bit frustrated as church. Like, why are we, and this is my own opinion, but why are we caving or bending the knee at these new cultural norms? Why must we come up with pastoral ways to treat people or to be with people who want to do this, that, or the other? Why can't we just be firm in what we believe, and with still giving the message, Jesus loves you. He died for you.
Yeah.
He will never stop loving you, but he calls you to a higher degree of living. And this isn't just the LGBT community. It's not just the elderly person that wants to end their life via euthanasia. This is not just about the woman that wants to have an abortion. This is all of us. Jesus calls all of us to a higher standard of living.
Yeah.
And so I get a little bit frustrated sometimes that it's almost become commonplace to use terminology that never existed, to look at families that are not what we call your traditional family unit, your nuclear family. Like, it almost gets annoying that we've changed this much and no one wants to say anything about how we've come as a society.
Especially when, I remember when I was quite young, someone said to me, Francis, that the church is the conscience of the world. It's the conscience of the world we live in. Just as we all have a conscience which just helps us discern what is right and wrong when informed, the church is the conscience of the world, and the world bends to the church, not the other way around. We shouldn't be afraid to say that. Like, no, it's not the church's job to bend to where the world is going. We should stay put and let the world come back towards the church. Yeah. So I completely agree with that.
So you had a situation during the same-sex marriage plebiscite, and is that some video you want to show us now?
Yeah, so context, same-sex marriage plebiscite is going on. We decide we're going to run a stall on campus where we just give out information, and we give out some kafta, some barbecue, some kafta with some hummus and a little pamphlet.
It's always enticing.
It does the job. But what we didn't do is we didn't make a Facebook event, which is our usual advertising sort of protocol. We didn't make a Facebook event. No one really knew it was going to happen. And the event was, booked by the chaplaincy. So this stall is running. They've cooked the barbecue. They're handing it out. People are lining up. I'm running late. I was visiting like another Catholic society at another uni, and I just get a message from Tony at the time who was there. Francis, where are you? Every word spelt incorrectly, mind you. So I was like,
rushed message.
Yeah. Francis, where are you? I'm like, what? Is his daughter type this message? I don't know. So I get to campus, and the video pretty much is what was going on just as I'd gotten there. Someone had come and flipped the whole table, like flipped it. And then just more and more protesters gathered, and they were pretty upset, to say the least. Now, I just might add, there's some things said in this which are quite profane. I bleep the swear words, but in terms of the actual, you guys can just deal with it in post.
We'll edit those in post-production,
Yeah.
The voice of compassion, and the voice of tolerance. This is it right here. No one's going to hit anyone. No one's going to hit anyone. Why did you kick him? No one's going to hit anyone. Tony, tell us. Why did you kick him? What a joke. You know who's the joke? You know who's the joke? Homophobia's got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! Homophobia's got to go, hey, hey! Ho, ho! Homophobia's do it!
Understand your logic. A homosexual voting no makes him a homophobe. Wow. We will win. Put the biggest in the bin. We will fight. We will win. Put the biggest in the bin. You are not respectfully debating. So they talk about respectful debate. They talk about civil debate. But I mean, we know, we see that all the violence. Worst of all, Andrew Bolt is on their side.
That's it.
And then you kicked him. Why?
Tony, that's it.
Yeah, well done. Well done. Why'd you kick him for?
Oh, you want to stomp on our faces now? Is that beautiful? You want to stomp on our faces?
Sorry, can I just ask one question? Sorry, can I ask a question? Is it possible for someone to decide to vote no with no intention of infringing someone's right from a hateful perspective?
Yeah, it's always
So anyone who votes no is...
infringes on their right to love who they want to marry,
So this whole...
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down!
No one's talking about racist. So all I want to say, come out here to say it's okay to say no, and this is what happens. Wake up, Australia.
I don't know, like...
So there might need to be a lot of that edited.
Yeah.
I said this last week. The inability to reason and have polite conversation, especially when it comes to what we just saw there, I've seen the equivalent happen and even worse outside of abortion mills. It's like that type of evil, the shouting, the lack of peace, the slogans, it all sounds the same.
Yeah.
It always sounds the same. Now, that's supposed to be a prestigious institution of education. And that's what's happening on university campuses and has happened on university campuses now for decades with various things. We've seen it recently with conflict, in the Middle East and the like. But when I look at stuff like that, I think to myself, again, you're just making noise and you're not allowing the other person that stands before you to just have a conversation. Very, very disappointing. Now, what are you feeling as you're there and experiencing all of this?
Yeah, honestly, just watching it now gives me anxiety. It's like look, when I arrived and it sort of had blown up, you sort of don't have a lot of time to think. Now, there were quite a few things that sort of happened that don't show in the video. The first is the university did nothing. No one was suspended. No one, like, there was no investigation. Now, I spoke at one point with some of the executives, and they said, we investigated that issue. You couldn't have investigated it without talking to the guy with the big afro in the middle. No one spoke to me. You know, that was back in the afro days. No beard. Things have changed since then. But no one spoke to me. The police came. They did nothing. One of their people pretty much spear tackled one of our guys. They just pulled him off. They pulled him aside, spoke to him, and that was it. A Channel 9 news camera came. He never made Channel 9. He recorded for about 20 seconds, and then he lowered his camera. And I actually walked up to him. I said, why'd you stop recording? Because there isn't some two-way fight that you're looking for. Because all the big Lebanese guys have their hands in their pockets, you know? That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a story to say there was a clash, there was a fight. There was just us being abused. Mainstream media didn't report. The university did nothing. The police did nothing. And they'll say afterwards they did. They're all liars. It's lies. And that was also a big wake-up call, like, stop thinking everything around you is fair. Like, then when someone says, hey, I hate you, like, you should believe them. They're probably telling you the truth if they're willing to tell you that they hate you by how they act or how they speak to you, you know? But there was a lot of anxiety, and they sort of circled, you know, you saw how Tony, they took our hummus, like, they literally scooped hummus in their hands and were, like, throwing it at us. And at one point, the guy on the megaphone, he even says, you guys are out here making kebabs. That's what white people call, you know, kafta, kebabs. And then he says to me, with the megaphone in my face, he says, go fetch us the kebabs. That's how they speak to us. And so I said, no worries. So I went and actually got the container, and we offered them, and like maybe 10 of them took kafta and they ate. And then I went back around to collect the skewers. I said, please don't throw anything on the ground. We want to make sure this goes in the bin. Because they were trying to, as inflamed as they were, they wanted us to be inflamed. And the interior disposition was like rage. Like, you saw that Jesus comment. Like, when that was said to me, in my head at the time, you're very quickly calculating, like, am I morally justified at this point to, you know?
To throw down.
Like, yeah, like, you ask yourself those questions, you know? Like, you ask yourself, surely it's okay by this point, you know? But we were there to, like, and the reason why you see me sort of always separating people, it's like, we're there to show that we are, in effect, not of this world. Like, we don't act this way. Yeah. And it's not for lack of capacity. Like, you see all of those scenes. My hands were in my pocket for a reason. Because when you look like me, okay, when you look like me, you're 6'4" and a conservative Catholic. As soon as you turn and accidentally knock someone and you hit, you know, some girl's leg, all of a sudden you touch someone inappropriately. Yeah. That was my fear. Like, someone's going to accuse me of something. They were getting quite close. And when people got close, I always put my hands in my pockets because I fear that I will be accused of doing something that I didn't do. Yeah. But anyone who watches that knows we didn't take it out of lack of capacity to do more, you know, which is what the whole Catholic society really acted with authentic meekness. Yeah. To be meek isn't because you're weak. You know, like, each one of us was combined in weight to 4 of them, you know. So it wasn't a matter of, we can't do anything about this. It's no, we choose not to do anything because we're trying to represent something bigger than ourselves. That's right. You know, there's something outside of us that governs how we act.
That's right.
You know, but yeah, it was rough. Like, this is one where we had, you know, girls sitting in the lawn crying, like, terrified. Like, we just came here to give out kafta, and now we're getting screamed at and abused. And they just kept throwing glitter at me, and they throw condoms. And it's not because the glitter hurts. Obviously, it's just glitter. It's annoying. It didn't come out of my hair for like 2 weeks, but it's not about, you've caused me physical pain. It's like, you can throw things at me. You can throw condoms. You can throw glitter. You can throw food at us. And no one did anything about it. You know, so it was, it wasn't the greatest experience. And the aftermath was also sort of very interesting, which we can get to.
That video, that, like, it really
riles you up.
Yeah, it gets all the leb reactions going. But I just want to touch on what you were saying about meekness, right? And it's like, one of the things I hate, like, it really gets my blood boiling even more than that, is when I read comments from Catholics or I hear Catholics say, enough turning the other cheek. We've done it for long enough. It burns me because I'm like, you have no idea what turn the other cheek means. If you think that people are just like turn the other cheek means you just sit and let people walk all over you. That's not what it means. And it just burns me that people are like, no, you know, that Christ turned the other cheek. I don't have to do that. I'm thinking, okay, well, you're not living not living a great life if you're not trying to imitate Christ and thinking you can do things differently. But so Bishop Barron had a great explanation of what turn the other cheek meant. To sort of summarize it, is basically he was saying, so someone would strike you on the cheek, so it was like sort of a master-slave thing. And what you would do is you would turn the other cheek. When Christ says turn the other cheek, it's saying, I'm not going to live in the world that you want me to live in. I'm not going to, I'm not sort of going to bend my knee to you. Like, you're not my master, you know? And it's sort of a turn around and say, like, you know, I'm living in this world. In the world I'm, you know, I'm creating for myself, but the world that I'm a part of, right? The real world, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, and that's exactly what you guys did in that video. It's not letting people walk all over you. Like, people will look at that and think, why didn't you throw hands? You know,
Yeah.
Why didn't you hit back? Why didn't you throw things at them, whatever? When you went and got them the kufta, when they asked for it, that's literally that's exactly what
That's
Bishop
the world
Barron,
I live in.
Exactly. That's literally what Bishop Barron explains. Is like, you know what? Like, yeah.
You know what they say, you're not you when you're hungry. So I thought maybe that would help. It didn't help much. Just gave him more energy for another 2 hours. So yeah.
But that's what turning the other cheek it's not just responding to these people. It's responding in the spiritual battle that's even deeper than what's going on there. And so, like when we spoke about the Olympics and people were saying the response that you should have is to go to mass. And I was thinking, what does that do for anyone? Like, obviously going to mass, but as in like going to mass is great, obviously, for your soul. But I'm thinking in response to the Olympics, what in the world does going to mass do? And then I was like listening to all these different talks and videos that, like, I was watching all these different videos coming out and all these homilies. It's because this is a spiritual battle before it is just a human battle. The
That's
people
right.
you were going up against you weren't just going up against those people.
Yeah.
It was like, seriously, when we talk about the evil that was happening there, it's there's someone really driving that evil. You know, it's a spiritual battle. And so to get at these people, or to get at the Olympics, for example, you know, I was saying I'm not going to watch the Olympics, but to get at the devil, go to mass.
Yeah.
You know, increase your devotion to the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Whatever. Like, so turning it to that's just my little point on turning the other cheek isn't merely just a response to let people walk all over you. It's not letting people walk all over
For
you
sure.
at all.
Yeah.
But it's also a response to the spiritual battle, to the evil one.
Yeah.
So
For sure. And it's like in that moment, it's quite hard to discern, okay, like we obviously don't want to respond in a violent or aggressive way, but we also don't want to stand down. We also don't want to give the perception that we're acknowledging in some way that we're doing something wrong, because we're not. So it's like, how do we stand our ground and not progress? And like, you're sort of walking on this really fine line at times, especially when it gets really heated, you know. And what was interesting is I had a lot of people say, so this happened on like, I think a Thursday. Friday night, I met up with the guy who ran that channel at the time, Our Lady of Lebanon. We stayed up till 5 a.m. editing. And what was interesting is as I'm editing it, because I was listening to it on repeat, the screaming, by 5 a.m. in the morning, I didn't want to release it. Like, out of pity. I was like, man, these are hurt people. Like, I felt this overwhelming sort of pity for them. Obviously, we still decided to release it because people need to see what's going on. But like you said, there's something far deeper going on than simply that. And then I think on the Saturday night was the convention, the launch of the No campaign. And when I went, a few people had identified me from the video. And they said, Francis, like, how did you not get angry? And I said, you have no idea how angry I was. And in fact, there was one moment where I did lose my cool a little bit. I didn't touch anyone or hit anyone, but I lost my cool. And despite 50 people having their phones and videos out, nothing caught me having my little rant. Like we were just, there was that circle that had formed sort of around me and Tony, and this one kid yells at me. He's like I say kid, he was just a bit shorter, but a guy there yells and he says, oh, look at this guy standing in the middle trying to intimidate everyone. And I just like, in that moment of everything I heard, I just fired up. And so I walked over to him. I was like, me intimidate? You guys have got 80, 90, 100. You're screaming, you're throwing food, you're throwing condoms, you're making people cry, you're writing like pretty depraved things on the floor. Who's intimidating who? And he's like, oh no, I'm like, no, I'm just trying to. Like, think about it. You're standing with a mob and you're shouting us down for the last 2 hours. Don't call me the one, like the intimidator, because I'm willing to stand in the middle and cop it. Anyway, like it was a bit more animated than that. And afterwards I thought, man, if someone got that on video, it's not a good look, because he was a bit shorter than me, but nothing caught it. So I got away with it.
Well, Channel 9 may have put their video camera down, but there was another news agency that was interested in your side of the story.
Yeah.
And you were on Sky News.
You're with Andrew Bolt.
With Andrew Bolt on the Bolt Report.
Oh,
and
nice.
that can still be seen on YouTube today. We might get the link for that.
Yeah.
Put the link in here.
Oh, is it still on
Do
YouTube?
this, Francis. Do this with us.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube.
I've got the link as well.
So we'll
a
make
copy,
sure,
I can send it to you.
We'll
yeah.
make sure we sort that out.
But what was interesting in that
So
video,
talk to us about that.
You could hear him say, you know, he's like, the gay bashers are on their side, the bigots are on their side, and he lists all these people and he goes, worst of all, Andrew Bolt is on their side. It was in that video.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, I was on Andrew Bolt.
So how do you get approached for that? What was that experience like?
I just got a call from some woman. She's like, hi, I'm a producer for the Bolt Report, and we'd love to have you on to discuss what happened last week at uni. I was like, okay, where do I go? And he's in Melbourne, but there's a studio in Macquarie Park. So that night I was heading over late afternoon. I said, Mum, I'm going to be on Andrew Bolt. And I literally looked the same I looked in that video. Same jacket, same everything, the fuzzy like hair. And she said, hek bedak troh, which means you're going to go like that. I said, Mum, don't worry, you got to be authentic. She's like, hey, you're authentic. There's متبين مثل شاب حلو and all this stuff. I said, Mum, you got to give up on me now. So I went and it's quite odd. I'd never been on a sort of TV interview before. So I'm staring into a camera. I can only hear him. I can't see him. And we had the interview. And it went well. A lot of people saw it, and I think a lot of people just resonated with what the Catholic Society was trying to do. You know, at the end of the day, it's never me or another individual. We're just trying to represent a greater, again, something outside of ourselves, outside and above. Mm-hmm. And I ended up being on Andrew Bolt again a couple of years later when I was elected to the Senate of the university. It's like a student election on the board of the university. There are 2 student positions, and I ran for one of them and I won. And I was on Andrew Bolt again, this time a little bit more well-groomed. A little bit more well-groomed. So, it was an interesting experience. Like, you sort of realise how many people are looking to others to step up. And while, again, it's flattering, it's like, no, we can all sort of do our part. The hatred actually came when I ran for Senate. A lot more than this, because here there was a lot of us. When it was Senate, it was like Francis Tamer, the individual, is running for this position, and they wrote articles about me. It actually got to a point they released a satirical edition of their magazine, the student newspaper called Honey Spa. Like, their whole MO is just to write the most degenerate things every single week in their magazine, and they released this satirical interview with me, made up completely. But it's not abundantly clear it's made up. And in it, they imply a lot of horrible things about me, to the point where they imply that I was essentially molested in high school by the brothers at my Catholic high school. Like, that's how bad it got. And, like, that stuff cuts when you first read it, especially when, like, what can I do about it? Because, again, your instinct is, I want to go down to their offices and start swinging at their computers. But it's like, no, we don't really play by those rules, you know. This isn't Lebanon, so it was like, what do we do, you know? And I remember speaking with a defamation lawyer. It was like, surely they can't just do this stuff. He says, Francis, look, when it comes to defamation law in Australia, there's like a 150K limit unless you're extremely high profile. It'll cost you a fortune. Long story short, this just won't be worth your time. And it took me a long time, not that I was upset for a long time, but just accepting that there's nothing I can do now. Like there's nothing is more off-putting for me than injustice. You know, but sometimes you just got to accept justice will come in the next life and not this one.
That's right. And that's not the world you live in.
Yeah.
And so you were probably forcefully asked to turn the other cheek on that.
Yeah, pretty much.
In the realm of all of that. That's crazy. I suppose in an environment where it is so intense, there'd be adrenaline running, a group of people start to rile up the crowd. I'm thinking about the Jesus before Pontius Pilate. You know, like 3/4 of that crowd don't want Jesus to be crucified, but the crowd just starts to get rolled up because of people around them. Even that young woman that we saw in the video, like, who are you to stop two people from loving each other? If you really had a one-on-one conversation with that young woman,
it would have been a much better outcome.
You could talk about definitions of love.
Yeah.
You could talk about what a relationship is.
You could even talk about what matrimony is.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
We all have heard the word matrimony, which means marriage. Matri means mother, and the suffix moni means to become. Matrimony means, like, literally to become a mother. That's the origin. That's the Latin origin.
Yeah. So,
like, it's so fundamental to it, but it's like, you're right. If you could sit one-on-one, it'd be a very different outcome. You know,
and it's almost a very socialist approach, isn't it?
Very socialist approach.
The redefinition of terms, redefinition of language. Our language is hijacked to suit a person's particular ideology.
Yeah.
And that's what we face. We face it to this day. It's tough. It's tough.
It is. Well, do you find the same thing, Abuna, like dealing pastorally with people in a parish community? Like dealing with them one-on-one being significantly different to the mobs?
Always different. I've been a firm believer in the heart-to-heart with a person. Always the heart-to-heart, the conversation. Now, I don't get that opportunity, obviously, when I'm preaching.
Yeah.
And sometimes the fire in me erupts when I preach, and I realise you got to tone this down because it's the first pew, the last pew, and everyone in between.
Yeah.
So you just don't know who you're getting to.
Yeah.
But when you actually sit down with a person who may have taken something you've said the wrong way, they give you their story. I've actually been emailed by a viewer of this show, and I won't disclose, but just for the sake of what we're talking about, something that I had said one show, which I thought was just, a joke, actually affected a viewer. And it affected them to the degree that they have had a past and a history of the particular topic that we were talking about, and just said, Father, I love what you do, I love what you stand for, but please be mindful that
you're speaking to the masses. Yeah.
You're speaking to the masses. And it was actually a very humbling experience, and it made me reflect and think about that sometimes, even in our way of speaking and presenting, we can ruffle some feathers like I love ruffling feathers, but I never want to hurt someone.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that's the difference, is we've got to draw a fine line, and we need to be very balanced in the way that we approach things. But I mean, we're talking now topics of, we're talking about the redefinition of marriage. We're talking about the right to life. You had a lot to do with the pro-life movement as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of people leaned on you, whether that be logistically or rallying the troops. For a lot of the, I suppose, protests and exhibitions on right to life. That was 2019, wasn't it?
2019, yeah.
Did you come up against anything there?
Look, the 2019 campaign was interesting because, again, I touched down. I'm like, I've done nothing for this pro-life crime essentially being committed, and so I was like, I have to do something. I don't know what, But I just started to go to state parliament where they were outside protesting, and I'd just sit with them, you know. I was lucky at the time. My boss, being very sort of pro-life as well, supported what I was doing, and that's sort of where I started. And when the bill passed and it then had to go to the upper house, we decided to organise the rally, the one at Martin Place. And that's when I called. At the time, I was sort of in touch with the Eastern bishops because I had done a lot of work during the same-sex marriage campaign. So I was pretty close with Bishop Tarabai from the Maronites. But all the Eastern bishops used to meet. And then there was just me with the fro, you know, calling everyone Sayyidna. It was quite an experience. And they all call each other Sayyidna as well. So it's very Inception-like. Yeah. So I called the bishops and I said, I called a few of them and said, look, we need to do something big. You know, like we should do a rally. And all of them were just like, yeah, let's do it. And that's what I love about the Eastern bishops. Like they fire up real quick. And so we organised the rally. Now, there were other agencies involved at the time, you know, Right to Life and other pro-life agencies. So we spoke with them and they're like, oh, yeah, you know, we were planning to do a rally as well. I was like, yeah, but we'll take care of it, you know. There was always like that little bit of a tussle, like, and so there were a lot of agencies involved. And what I learned in that campaign, you know, same-sex marriage campaign was like us against the world. Abortion campaign, it was us against each other. And that's what was very difficult to deal with at times. Many very well-intentioned, good-hearted people, but there were also people I had to deal with who I felt were serving their own interests. It was about building their own profile, creating something for themselves out of this. And I've always maintained that all my work for the church is volunteer, and I have my own job, I have my own business, and that's all separate because I want to be able to give freely and not have anything to lose. I know it's a bit of a cautious way to live, but for me, I was scarred in my earlier days from certain involvement with the church, and I just decided I will always be a volunteer. I don't want anyone to sort of decide if I have an income or not. And what that meant was I could be a bit more zealous in my approach, so to put it lightly. But it was a big challenge. You know, we were organising this rally, and I said, look, I'll look after logistics. I had, 60 guys, 40 of them Maronites come to volunteer. I organised all of that. I organised the speakers. Like I bought a sound system. We bought it on the morning of the rally because the company we hired, they're like, we found out you don't have council approval, so we won't be involved. We don't want to damage our reputation with the council. Even though it was owned by like a Catholic guy, I was like, oh, that's fine. Well, that's what you want. That's what you want. So we bought the speakers on the morning of, and I literally had to call the bishops. Like, hey, you guys all willing to pitch in for some gear? They're like, yeah, we'll split it. And on the morning, I was learning how to wire speakers, and we hired all these generators. And the sound setup on the day was horrible. Looking back, now that I've done a lot of sound engineering, but it was just like generators, petrol spilt, I'd get like a thing like, oh, generator here's down, and like come and you got to start it up again, and like they're trying to refill, and it just smells like petrol. It was great, but it was real like raw. It was a really raw event, and I was just a guy in the beanie with the logistics guys. Didn't make a speech, didn't involve myself. Again, I've always been of the view you do your part. No one is above sort of certain roles, but there was a lot of difficulty, and we met a lot of resistance during that process, or I met a lot of resistance, and there were almost people, they would sort of try and slight you in different ways. Yeah. You'd make it agree, oh, I've already invited this person to speak because they have some backdoor deal with some person, and like I don't like to speak this way about the church because it's not the church I'm speaking about, it's just there are a lot of agencies involved, and the reality is the church's infallibility doesn't depend on how great the people are. Like what they say, the church has existed all this time not because of us, but it's in spite of us. Which is a great quote. But yeah, it was difficult at time, and it got to a point when we organised the second rally, which was in Hyde Park. I pretty much said, look, I'm going to organise all the logistics in the back. I don't want to be on any committee meetings. I don't want to come to your meetings. I don't want the minutes. I don't want your emails. Because I just felt like certain people, not all of them, most people are just awesome. You would know most of them. Most of them were at your birthday, like absolute like fire blazers. Like they just love the church and its mission. but you just get people scattered in there. Yeah. And I remember getting a call from one of the people involved, and she said, Francis, I don't want you to step back. Like, we want you to do X, Y, Z. And I remember saying to her, it's not about whether my name is on the official, in the meeting minutes, you know, like, I think it was G.K. Chesterton that said, I've travelled the world far and wide and never seen a statue of a committee. You know, like, it's not about the committee. Like, let's all just zone back in. Like, kids are being killed in their mother's womb. And in many cases, the mothers are almost just as big victims of this whole movement. Like, let's sort of go back to that. But we had the rally. It was awesome. Like, you had 10,000 people in Hyde Park. The Martin Place one is always going to be sort of the classic. But, you know, just having that many people marching to Parliament House, you have all the Lebanese drummers, and yeah, it was an experience. It was an experience for sure. I met a lot of communities. So, like, I got really close with the Greek community. Like, I would go there, and they're just the most hospitable people. You know, they're trying to, like, marry you their daughter or something. Like, it's like, that's a level of hospitality I'm not used to. You know what I mean? But they're just like amazing people. And I would always visit the different Eastern churches to coordinate a few things. And just every community, a lot of them just love Christ. And we forget that. Like, there are other Christian communities who are willing to fight this with us, you know.
We're talking about probably the two biggest and culture-changing things of our time in the redefinition of marriage, and then what has always been an assault on human life, which is abortion. And then these two things are obviously tied in hand. It's the devil's assault on the family, dividing the family, a family unit. And we are so pleased and honoured that you said yes to God and you participated in the way that you did, and you brought your gifts and talents to these very special causes.
Thanks, Abuna.
Francis, we've got so much more to talk about that I think we need to do a part 2. So everyone stay tuned for part 2 next week.
Father Ben, as a cliffhanger.
Yes.
The jacket, what's the go? Or is that we have to wait until next week?
I think you're going to have to wait until next week to know what the jacket's all about. So stay tuned for next week. This is the most colourful I have looked in nearly a decade. So you'll know about the jacket next week, so stay tuned for that.
Does that mean you have to wear it next week?
I'm going to wear it next week too.
Cool.
And that has a lot to do with our guest today, our special guest today. Francis and I were talking a lot of basketball on his podcast, but we're going to get into a lot of that and a whole lot more next week on the show. So we'll conclude with prayer.
So, Father, just before that, have you wished him happy birthday? You turned, was it 50 on the weekend?
It was 40.
Oh, sorry.
It was 40. And I want to give thanks to God in prayer now.
2-year anniversary as a priest.
Yeah. It all comes around the same time.
Shortly before your birthday.
So it's a beautiful thing. Francis, thank you, my son. 50.
You know what? Talking about your ordination next week as well, because that also has had a bit of an impact on the journey. So we'll talk about that next week.
Let me note that down, because I'd love to hear what you have to say about the ordination.
Yeah, for sure.
This is interesting.
So there's a lot to talk about next week. So stay tuned, everyone. Thank you for watching. And Francis, again, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your conviction. And I hope what the people have heard today is a catalyst for them to stand up and be more courageous in their own families and the whole cultural fight that we're in at the moment, within not just in the church but in life. So important. Cultural, spiritual, it's all tied in.
Thanks.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. We give you thanks, Almighty God, for all your gifts and benefits, you who live and reign, world without end. Amen.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Remember, our Lord Jesus Christ says, you are the salt of the earth. What good is salt if it loses its taste? So stay salty.
And don't be afraid to go against the grain. God bless.